All right, well, let me go ahead and officially get started. I want to welcome everybody to our program this evening. It should be a wonderful program, and I will introduce our speaker here in just a few minutes. But just a few introductory things. First, to introduce myself, my name is Carol Bailey White. I'm the president of Duval Audubon Society, and we're so happy to have you here. We also have a couple of board members here with us, Carolyn Antman, who is our conservation director for our Duval County, and excuse me, Christine Lucas is our membership director. There's Christine. And I thought we had Helen Kurt here as well. Hang on just a second, I have to clear my throat. I apologize. At least I turned my mic off at that point. One time in a meeting last week, I said, I have to clear my throat. And I forgot to turn my mic off, so everyone had to listen to that. So I apologize. We do ask that you keep your audio on mute during the presentation, just as a courtesy for the speaker in case there's any kind of background noise going on. If you do have questions for the speaker, you can just put them in the chat window and we will address those after the presentation. We'll have a Q&A session. And I think we can move on to the next slide. Let me talk a little bit about our chapter. So we are a chapter of the National Audubon Society, and we're also a member of Audubon, Florida. We have about 1,200 members in Clay, Duval, and Nassau counties in Northeast Florida. We are an all-volunteer 501c3 nonprofit, and our mission is to connect people with nature. Everything we do is all about trying to connect people with nature in whatever way. And we just want to make sure that everyone knows that they are welcome to join us at any of our activities. All right, so here are our upcoming events. I just wanted to focus on these a little bit for the next few minutes. Just to let you know, we've got a lot of stuff going on. We're very glad that we were able to resume some field trips after the big COVID gap where we didn't feel comfortable getting people together, and even though things are still a little bit iffy with more people vaccinated and people taking precautions, we felt it was okay for us to go ahead and resume our field trips to various locations. And so we also have, this coming Saturday, we have our Crosby Sanctuary open house, and I think I mentioned that a little while earlier. From 8 a.m. until 12 p.m. You don't have to register for it. Basically, you can just drop in and just enjoy the sanctuary. If you do come on Saturday, I would recommend bug spray, because the yellow flies, we were out there the other day and the yellow flies were pretty bad. And also boots are definitely recommended. With all this rain, there's a lot of water out there. It is a swamp. So of course, you don't have to walk directly through the swamp, but boots are a good idea. We'll also be having our outreach table at the Talbot Tidewater celebration on this Saturday as well, from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. So if you are on that side of town, drop by and say hello to our volunteers working our outreach table. Let's see, on Saturday, October 2nd, we have a field trip at the Camp Blanding Wildlife Management Area. And you'll note the asterisk after that. So all of our field trips do require advanced registration on our meetup site, and the meetup site web address is at the bottom of the slide there. So it may already be full. I'm not really sure where we are on that, but even if you are at all interested, I recommend even if it is full, getting on the waiting list, because sometimes people do drop out, and you do have a good chance of getting into the field trip if you're interested in that. Sunday, October 3rd, also at 8 a.m., we have a Birding 101 field trip at Ready Point Preserve, another fabulous spot for migration. Our leader is going to be Thomas Rotsalu. I don't know if you know him, but he is a fabulous birder and just wonderful at identifying these fall warblers. So that would be a good trip to go on for sure. Saturday, October 9th, also at 8 a.m., we're going to be at Jacksonville Arboretum and Gardens. And then on the 16th of October, we're going to have our Crosby Sanctuary Nature Walk and Work Day. So if you're interested in coming out just to see the sanctuary, you're welcome to come out. But it's also a work day. So we do, volunteers do trash pickup and weeding and trimming of bushes and that sort of thing. So you're very welcome to come out and join us to help us with that. We're having a cleanup at the St. Augustine Road Fish Management Area on Sunday, October 18th. And our next month's program is going to focus on light pollution and birds. So that will be an interesting one. You'll want to check that one out. All right. I did want to talk a little bit about this current issue that's going on. It's pretty important. While you look at that slide, I'm actually going to read this prepared information just to talk a little bit about it. Hopefully it won't take too long. All right. So the Ocklawaha River is the largest tributary to the St. Johns, but since the 1960s, the natural flow of the river has been blocked by the Rodman Dam, which is a remnant of the Cross Florida Barge Canal project, which was halted in 1972 due to the extreme environmental damage that would be caused by the project. The dam itself has no function other than to create a big pool of water, drowning at least 20 natural springs and submerging 7,500 acres of forest and 16 miles of river under a massive pool of water. As you can see from the photo, debris and vegetation builds up behind the dam, and the state of Florida spends millions of dollars every 3 to 4 years to open the gates of the dam and draw the water level down in order to control the excess vegetation. We are now at a critical juncture. The dam is reaching the age where the structure either needs to be completely renovated or breached. And within the next few days, the St. Johns River Water Management District will be offering the public an opportunity to weigh in on which option should be taken with regards to the dam. Duval Audubon is a member of the Free the Ocklawaha Coalition, which supports breaching the dam to allow the natural flow of the river to be restored. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but we do strongly believe that restoring the natural flow of the river will not only benefit the wildlife of the area, but will also provide more recreational opportunities, and will also improve the water quality in the St. Johns River, as more than 150 million gallons of fresh water per day will be added to the flow of the St. Johns. Not only that, but breaching the dam will eliminate millions of taxpayer dollars to continue to be wasted in future upkeep of the dam and the pool. So please visit freetheocklawaha.com to learn more and sign up for alerts that will let you know when and how to submit your input once the public comment period opens. And we do expect the public comment period to open within the next few days. I'm not sure exactly what date, but it will be pretty soon. Okay. Do any of the other board members have any other quick announcements before we move on to our speakers? Carolyn, Christine, anything? Okay. All righty. Okay, well, let's move on to our speakers this evening, or our main speaker is going to be Paul Baicich. Paul has been an active birder since his early teens in New York City. His concerns include an interest in bird conservation and policy, as well as studies in avian breeding biology, waterfowl, and the practice of bird feeding over the decades. Among his many activities, he worked for the American Birding Association in multiple roles, has worked for the National Wildlife Refuge System on a consultant basis on issues of popular birding and paralleled refuge receptiveness. And he's also led or co-led trips from Alaska to Cuba. In addition, Paul co-edits with Wayne Petersen the popular monthly Birding Community E-bulletin and writes a regular column called Quick Takes for Birdwatchers Digest. And in 2014, Paul received the Ducks Unlimited Wetland Conservation Achievement Award in the category of communications. Tonight's presentation, called Birding and Beyond in Cuba, will allow us to visually visit a number of key bird locations on the islands, as well as examine opportunities for connecting with our counterparts in Cuba. We'll look at these fascinating birds, places, and people in terms of advancing bird education, conservation, and responsible ecotourism. Our presenters wish to convey to you some of the birds, nature, and potential on the island, opportunities that can be found at one of our country's closest neighbors. Paul's co-speaker this evening is Soledad Palyaca, I think I did that right, who spent 10 years in human rights efforts in Central America, taught at the University of Salerno, Italy, worked in the Philippines on the elimination of the exploitation of women in the international sex trade and other women's health issues, and is currently the projects director of the Friendship Association based in St. Augustine. The association sponsors delegations to Cuba in support of their conservation projects and related educational and cultural events in Cuba and in the US. She is also the managing editor of Ediciones Nuevos Mundos, the publishing branch of the Friendship Association, which has pioneered publications on the birds, culture, and natural history of Cuba. And without further ado, let me go ahead and close my share and allow Paul to go ahead and start his presentation.
Terrific. I'll start. I want to let everyone know that I'll be doing most of the presentation and Sole will be my backup. Sole has forgotten more about Cuba than I will ever know. I have been there about a dozen times. She has been there many dozen times and spent many, many months there and knows it intimately. I would also bring to your attention, and I will save Sole some explanation. The previous picture you saw with her holding a Cuban parrot was of an injured bird. We'll be discussing captive and cage bird problem in Cuba as we get into the presentation. So I'll lead most of it, and the last quarter will be Sole's, but she is always welcome to add details if I do something incorrectly or leave us with some question marks. And of course, you can all help us with your under the chat section for any comments you want to leave or questions you want to leave, and we can deal with that at the end. So let's see if I can manage this in screen share. There we go to screen share. And I'm going to go, hold on. I'm going to go full screen, and excuse me, screen sharing. Hold it. I'm going to stop screen sharing right now because I have a problem with this. Hold on. Excuse me. All right. There we go. All right. Let's try it again, Paul. There we are. And excellent. Okay. So Carol, can you see the first slide here, Birding and Beyond in Cuba?
Not yet.
Okay. That's because I'm not screen sharing. Hold on. I'm going to go back and do the process all over. You know, you would think that a whole year of Zoom, I'd understand how to do this. I ought to get a 12-year-old to help me. Now do you see at least the beginnings of the slide? And I'll go to the...
Yep.
All right, great.
Looks good. Looks good.
All right, there we are. All we need is another 12-year-old. Anyhow, we'll be discussing birding and beyond, particularly beyond in Cuba, and some of the opportunities and lessons. We could focus on the birders, our colleagues and friends. And by the way, this is slowly looking up into the air as we're at a feeder in the at the Zapata swamp area. This is my old friend, Larry Baltram, who some of you may know as a former president of the American Birding Association. And this is Michael Canizares. His face is covered. He's one of our guides, and you'll get to meet him a little later. Anyhow, we can focus on the birders, or we could focus on the birds, and they're wonderful and spectacular. You'll get a good feeling for them as we go through this. This is the Cuban Trogon, the national bird of Cuba, and everyone should be looking for that and appreciate that. Or we could look and orient this toward more through what I call and what Sole calls breakthrough birding in Cuba, opportunities and lessons to connect with our counterparts. And by the way, you can see that I have framed some of the pictures in green. These are, and you will take notes, please, because it'll be in the exam at the end of the semester. These are the instructional interchange engagement lessons that we have with our counterparts, while the black framed ones are my fabulous photos, and I say that in jest, and the red ones are other people's photos. So you'll see we have red, other people's photos, black, mine, and green, mine are other people's, but they are lessons engaged. These are our counterparts, our colleagues, our friends on the island. Here's Michael Canizares on the left, who's our guide, and he's the former president of the Zoological Society in Cuba. Our dear friend Rosendo Martinez, he's the former head of what's called, we would call in the United States, visitor engagement in the national park system. Here's our driver Ronel, wearing his appropriate tie and jacket as he's instructed to do while he's driving our bus, a fine fellow. And here's our good friend and local colleague, Adrian Cobas. He's a local birder with a fabulous, what they call casa particular or casa de renta, or a homestay. It's like an Airbnb, a Cuban Airbnb in Playa Larga in the Zapata Swamp area. So we're going to touch on a few things. We're going to have a standard visit to 3 core locations or regions. The 3 important ones will be the Viñales area, the Zapata area, and the Havana area. And then we're going to take 4 quick side trips just to get a feel for different areas of Cuba also, including Guanahacabibes in the western edge of Cuba, the north coast, Baracoa on the eastern edge of Cuba, and the mountains of around the Topes de Collantes. And each of these will have some educational or engagement aspects which we regard as particularly important. Anyhow, you all know where Cuba is because you live in Florida and it's south of you, so near and so yet so far. It's 42,000 square miles, maybe the size of Virginia or Tennessee or of your very own Florida. If you exclude the Panhandle, it's about the same size. So you get a good feeling. It's the home to 6 terrestrial ecoregions: moist forest, dry forest, pine forests, wetlands, scrub, and mangroves. And about 20%, a full 20% of the island is set aside as natural areas, which is phenomenal. And according to the official census, there are about 11.2 million people living on the island. And believe it or not, they're split half and half, male and female. Imagine that. The birth rate is somewhat low, 9.9%, 9.9 births per 1,000. That was in 2006. And it's one of the lowest in the Western Hemisphere. And Havana itself, in terms of population, is about 2.2 million. So we'll touch on the 3 top areas that we're going to do. Viñales, Zapata Swamp, and Havana first, and then we'll do the other locations as we go on, and you'll get to visit them on the map if you have a short memory. We're going to move next on to, hold on. Yes, bird species on the island. About almost 400 bird species, 26 endemics, as it says here, 22 of which are of national or international conservation concern. This is a chart here, a display by our friend Niels Navarro. You'll meet Niels a little later. It has some of my absolute favorite birds here on here, and you'll get to visit them again, but I'll give you advance notice that they include bee hummingbird here, Cuban blackhawk underneath it there, Zapata wren, I think Zapata wren is there, number 18. There you go, Zapata wren. Cuban toady, which is here, number 12, and Cuban Trogon, which you saw before, and here is pictured as number 11. Some of my absolute favorite birds, and you'll get to see all of them again later. So let's start our trip for the 3 most important places. The Viñales area starting. Viñales area is here. It's a couple of hours west of Havana. We will have had landed in Havana and traveled west on our bus. We met our bus driver. We got through customs, which is sometimes a minor ordeal or an annoyance at times and a delay. But we've gotten on a bus, gone to Viñales here. Viñales is characterized by these Haystack Mountains. They're called mogotes. They're limestone karst mountains. They're beautiful. Almost anybody with a curiosity in the environment will take a trip to the Viñales area, even if they're just visiting Havana, because there are a number of local trips arranged by the governmental associated tourist companies that'll take you for a day to the Viñales area. And it's really good, but we stay there a few days, not just an afternoon. And it's really important for us. We'll get to introduce a couple of our characteristic Cuban species that we'll see multiple times. Your quiz at this particular point in the left photo is to see if you can find the Cuban Trogon. This is one of my fabulous photos. There it is on center left of the screen, of the picture, so to speak. But another one of my photos here is of the Cuban Pygmy owl. We get to bump into those every couple of days, tooting, and it's a diurnal little owl, so you don't have to look at night. You can see it during the day also. And as we go through some of the areas of Viñales, we'll get to see some other unique and very important species like the yellow-headed warbler on the left, and the fairly common and regularly seen West Indian woodpecker on the right. West Indian woodpecker is not a Cuban endemic, but it is indeed one of my favorite birds. And you can look at it, you can see that it is very similar to our red-bellied woodpecker. And that's not an accident because it's in the same genus. And there you go. Viñales here's some of the Haystack Mountains here. That we view from one or another of our motels. This is one of the hotels we stayed at, overlooking this valley here in the town. We go toward the mogotes or take a walk, and we look for this particular important endemic bird. It's the Cuban solitaire. It looks a little bit like a washed out hermit thrush, if you will allow me that. It's gone through the washer and dryer. It's not known for its beauty, but it is known for its exquisite and lovely song. And our group will play the song and track the bird in and go and see if we can get a closer look. I leave you this particular photo, which I took also in the Viñales area, in the lowlands there. It's a picture of a tobacco drying shed, a traditional Cuban tobacco drying shed. You can see it's rather large with the size of the man at the doorway there. And that's a traditional Cuban area. We will often stay in Las Terrazas, a reforested project that was launched in 1968. It is a UNESCO biosphere reserve and an eco-village of Las Terrazas here. It overlooks a lovely little lake there, and we bird around the lake and around our grounds. The grounds are integrated into the woodlands, into the natural surroundings. Here's just an example of where we're staying. It's one of the nicest places. It's the Hotel Mocha. And right by the Hotel Mocha, by the way, here we are with our friend Ernesto, going through our checklist for the day. But right by, there are a couple of feeders here. It's a picture of mine, where the groundskeepers and the local staff keep it supplied with perhaps ground corn or some other feed. And you'll see a little spectacular, very important item which we have brought and distributed there regularly. It's a hummingbird feeder, and the hummingbirds will come to that, particularly the Cuban emerald, which is a bird that we get introduced to. You'll see a picture of the endemic Cuban emerald later. But for us, this is important. This is a symbol of part of what we do. These you may be able to pick up for $1 a piece at the dollar store there in Florida and in the Jacksonville area, very common. But in Cuba, you can't find $1 hummingbird feeders unless they're brought by us or people like us. And this is what we do. We occasionally drop these off to people. Their difficulty is keeping them full with the proper amount of 4-to-1 water to sugar. Sometimes for the local folks, even sugar, as Sole has told me, is hard to come by in this quantity for this purpose. But here we go. This is a symbol of what we do, and that's why both pictures are framed in green. We'll get to at the area of Las Terrazas and the area, we'll get to see some wonderful birds. The olive cap warbler in the pine trees. It hangs out in pine trees most of the time. It's not unlike the yellow-throated warbler that may hang out in pine trees in the south that you may be familiar with. We have the Cuban vireo, and almost endemic to the island of Cuba. And like most, it has a large build. It's a fairly large build, and it has a ring around the eye with a point toward the back. One of my favorite birds. I love woodpeckers, but the Cuban green woodpecker here is one of my favorites because it's endemic, it's medium-sized, and it always, to me, looks like its bill has been chiseled down to almost a stump, and that it's doing poorly, but it does quite well, and it's evolved that way, so it must be doing okay. And the red-legged honeycreeper, which is not endemic to the island, of course. It is a regional species for the Caribbean and some of the countries around the Caribbean. So these are some of the birds we will find in Viñales, in the Viñales areas. And later on, we'll go to the town of Soroa in that region, and we'll stay at the Villa Soroa. This is a loggerhead kingbird on the sign. I took this photo. I think I stayed at one of the places, one of these little rooms and sheds. A very nice place around the corner there. And your loggerhead kingbird is kind of like a gray kingbird, which you're familiar with in Florida, but a little larger. We'll meet its relation later, its larger relation yet, a little later on when we visit Baracoa. But in the area also is the Soroa Orchid Garden. It's a little ostentatious here, but it's a medium-sized, fairly large place we always go. It's a steep climb on paths, but we see many of the birds that I've just started to introduce to you. And we get used to some of the nifty places and excellent birding. Sometimes, if we're lucky, we'll bump into one of the guides at the garden, and she'll know, and Sola probably remembers her name, I don't recall her, she'll know all the birds without binoculars and point them out before we ever see them. It's wonderful. Some of these folks really do well, and we do leave a couple of the feeders, a couple of the hummingbird feeders with our friends at the staff there. So that covers that covers the Viñales area. And now we're going to take a trip to Zapata, which we spend multiple days at. And it is probably the most exciting and interesting place. And this is this large national park area, national reserve area is what I'm talking about here. And as the blue indicates, it's swamp and marsh. The swamp and marsh is probably the most interesting area, as well as the evergreen, not in terms of our evergreens, but always green, old forests, big forests, like here and here. In any case, we're going to Zapata next, and here it is. It's a very interesting location. To me, it's a patchwork, not a patchwork. It is a complex. It's a natural complex. It's a national biosphere reserve. It's a Ramsar site. It's not unlike some of our national forests in the West, where there are towns inside the national forest, which may be next to national monuments, or for those of you in Florida, just to your south, it may be like Merritt Island, which has a national seashore and a wildlife refuge right next to each other. Two different jurisdictions, but kind of blending from one into the other. And that's what Zapata, the Zapata Swamp is like. Here in the Maryland area and on the eastern shore, if you're familiar, I know, Carol, you said you used to live in the Baltimore area. We have Chincoteague National Wildlife Refuge in Virginia, which is next to the National Seashore. I mean, so this is the kind of complex, and I mean it in the good sense, that the Zapata is. And here's a map, and we'll revisit the map a couple of times to show you where we're going. This is a picture of a wall map in the entrance to the park, and you'll see this is washed out. That's because people were pointing their fingers there and washed and scrubbed away what it says there. But you can see some wonderful places. This is the general swamp here, the whole region. This is the Bay of Pigs, the famous Bay of Pigs here. Playa Larga, the town, is right at the center there. Include Bermeja is off here to the east, the town that we visit, and you'll see that. And Santo Tomas is over here. We visit that too, and it's important for Zapata Wren for us. Here's another look. There's Santo Tomas. There's Playa Larga, where we stay. This is our headquarters. Here's Palpite, which we'll visit. I'll show you later. And there's the Bay of Pigs. This is an enormous, swamp. Zapata Swamp, not unlike the anchoring that the Everglades has to your south, to the other end of your state. Anyhow, as I said, we stay in Playa Larga, and this is the entrance to Playa Larga. No, that is not a giant crab, live crab there. It symbolizes the entrance to the town of Playa Larga, which is a bustling tourist and local location. Here are some of our birders on the left. Here are some of the carts with horses and mini semi-taxis. I don't know what they actually call them these days. Sole, you may hear that go back and forth that'll take you to the other end of town. It's a wonderful location, and this is where we have our homestay. We may be staying at a place on the left, for instance. This is the equivalent of a homestay or an Airbnb kind of operation. And we may go to a restaurant, to the Tiki restaurant here on the right. You'll see that at the end. But in terms of homestays and casas particulares, this is a Casa del Sol. But what is characteristic of this is not only the functioning bedrooms and little locations here and kitchen and kitchenette where we have breakfast, but invariably in this town, constantly building. That is to say, a second layer, a second level to grow for their increased tourist trade coming in. And there'll be people from France and Italy and Spain and Canada, as well as Americans down there. And as well as people who are interested in swimming, snorkeling, more on that later, and nature. This is one of the Casas Particulares, Casa Ana, that's run by the family that Adrian is a member of. He's holding one of the feeders, not the dollar feeder, but another feeder that was brought to him, and here's Adrian and yours truly here. And he has resurrected and cleaned up his backyard to make it bird friendly and birder friendly. You can see at this feeder here, set of feeders immediately to the right, you'll see, what do you see? Black-throated blue warbler here, exactly. That's what I'm looking at. Black-throated blue warbler, parallel warbler here, and yellow-faced grass squid, other birds, and you can sit there all day. There's some chairs right there. If you don't want to go out on a field trip with us, you can just plop yourself right there with a camera or with a beer and enjoy yourself and enjoy the birds as they come and go. But we will be going on one of our more interesting trips to the Everglade-like road that as we enter the park itself, the Gran Parque Nacional Montemar. It's Everglades-like, it's a coastal, not unlike that system, as I said, at Merritt Islands to your south. And here's a species that you don't regularly have in among the mangroves in Florida, the flamingo, American flamingo. It's very good. And among other birds we look for, of course, birds that are increasing and are almost becoming regular in parts of Florida. Our snail kite, wonderful snail kite, both males on the upper left and females and young on the right and on the bottom. But as we look through them, we have to look for a snail kite, a male snail kite that is much bigger than the snail kite, because that indeed is the Cuban blackhawk here. And here is my fabulous photo on the left, fabulous in quotes, where you can see the blackhawk right there in the upper left. But I also got this picture later on of a bird that came closer to our bus. And when I'm talking about our bus, we take a 23-kilometer drive down to the end of the road. It's like the road to Flamingo in the Everglades. It's one way, it goes down, and then you turn around and you come back. And here is our group plus some other eco-tourists. And you can see my image. I'm taking the photo. I'm on a little tower that's about 1 story tall. And here we are. Here's another great look at the wonderful Cuban blackhawk, often called a crab hawk. It loves to munch on crabs. That's one of the most important places. We'll spend an entire afternoon, Sole, right, down this road and do some casual birding for long-legged waders, songbirds if they are there, ducks, shorebirds, etc. At the end of the road, we often look for some rails also, and it's a great place. But we'll also take our bus to the interior toward Bermeja. This is the refuge Wildlife Refuge Bermeja. Here we are coming out. You can see Sully in the second person there. And what have we gone there for? Yes, on the way in, we will have seen a couple of Cuban parrots, and they're wonderful. But we're really going in there into the depths of this moist and dark refuge to go behind. It's a fenced wall, it's a blind, and on the other side of the blind, we'll be looking at a number of doves and pigeons, like the blue-headed quail dove. This is about as good as my photo gets. It's black framed, it's my photo. And they're going out after cracked corn. And the cracked corn is dropped there by our colleagues who know that we're showing up. Sully has given them a call. We'll be there in an hour. They throw out the cracked corn. And indeed, the blue-headed quail dove appears. And they appear basically at our feet. And when we're there long enough, they will leave their side of the fence and come around to our side of the fence, virtually unaware that we're human beings and we're any threat whatsoever, because they're kind of used to us. But also among them is the endemic and fabulous gray-fronted quail dove. This is not my photo. It's red framed by a guy by the name of James Hill, whom we know. As we leave, you saw that photo of Soleil and company coming out of the entrance and the exit to the Bermeja little refuge. We'll also bump into some Cuban parakeets. This is not my photo, but it might as well be because we're almost guaranteed to see them. Also in the Zapata area, you remember the road that came down to Playa Larga from the north, you might. We pass the town of Palpite and we go back to Palpite to visit our friend Bernabe here. And Bernabe, he lives in the little town and he has a number of flowering trees and bushes. which attract some wonderful birds. And here are the birders. By the way, here's one of our feeders. There you go. Surprise, surprise. I just noticed that. Some of our birders here looking up into the trees for the warblers, orioles, and especially hummingbirds that come to his backyard. And what we're looking for in particular is this bird here. This is my photo. You can see, or you can't see, or you can barely see that that is a Cuban, the bee hummingbird, the smallest bird in the world, the Cuban specialty that we come to see. But here on the left is a photo that I think was taken of myself and Bernabe and Ernesto. We brought Bernabe something that wasn't a hummingbird feeder, a classic hummingbird feeder, so to speak. It was what's called a humbug. It's a 2018 photo. You can see the feeder on the bottom here that I'm holding. You drop in bananas or banana peel, the fruit flies come and the fruit flies do their fruit fly thing, and they become meaty food for the hummingbirds and not just the syrupy sugared water that we normally provide. And you can see here, you'll get to see it here later, 2 years later in 2020. There it is. And here are decent photographs of both the male and the female bee hummingbird. Note, these are not my photos. They are other people's photos. But it is a fabulous opportunity. We may stay there 20 minutes, an hour and a half until we have our full of the birds, because here's Bernabe hand feeding virtually a bee hummingbird on the left. And there's a photo of bee hummingbird on the right. I believe these are both my photos, but I put them in green because they illustrate our interactions with the locals and our interactions with giving material of some use to them and of some use to aviatourism. So there you go. And by the way, these are also $1 feeders at some of the dollar stores. And some of you birders may be actually familiar with those models also. There it is, a photo. I think this is from Nane Royer. I think I am holding this. No. And there's a bee hummingbird coming to the feeder in my hand. Here's a wonderful photo, and I stole this off of Wikipedia. It shows you the size, the comparative size of bee hummingbird on a number 2 pencil of all things. Also in his backyard, in Bernabe's backyard, we can bump into Cuban Orioles. It's one of the more interesting dark-headed Orioles. You know, with Orioles, you expect the head to be a bright color. No, this endemic bird of Cuba is a very interesting Oriole with this color. Now that we've left Palpite, we're going to go into the interior, and I pointed out to you the town of Santo Tomas. Here it is, the town of, here's the bodega or the little shop of Santo Tomas. Here's a typical symbol of a Cuban, is my photos, all my photos, yeah. A typical Cuban school with the Cuban flag and the bust, the national bust, which occurs here all the time, of Jose Marti on the right, the national hero and poet and author of Cuba and of the early Cuban Revolution against the Spaniards. And by the way, his wonderful mural of the Ferminia, the Spanish name, the Cuban name for the Zapata wren, which is our main bird that we're looking for. So what do we have to do? Oh, by the way, yes, this is the school. There aren't many school children in the school, but they get a school teacher. It's a small classroom. They get the full service. These kids dressed up as they are, the school teacher here. And by the way, we bumped into the local doctor there. You can see the local doctor who makes regular visits. As I like to say, in Cuba, you throw a rock and you'll hit a doctor. They are lots of them, and they're everywhere. Indeed, and this is an aside, my own personal doctor, I didn't even know that, Dr. Bone from Guyana, who lives in Prince George's County here in Maryland. I only found out that he was trained in Cuba. From Guyana, the Cubans train doctors from all over the third world. But that's another aside. He's our good friend, Ernesto. I'm sorry, our guide with us. And this is how we get out to the location for the Ferminia. This are the boats that we take on our route out. They are, let's see, this is a canal built in 1919 to bring in supplies to the town of Santo Tomas. And we go out on this for about 20 minutes, a half hour, I don't know. The time just goes by quickly. And we go out to see the location for waiting for our Ferminia. So we go on this boardwalk and we wait. You know, there'll be 15 of us. There's Ernesto behind with his back to us and his camera that he always carries. And we wait and we wait. And Ernesto or Michael, our other regular guide, whom I showed before, we'll see Michael a couple of times here. We'll play a tape and we'll wait. And then we'll catch a glimpse. Here are my two best photos of the Zapata wren, here on the left and here on the right. You can see on the right that he is singing his heart out. And by the way, I know there is legitimate objection to overtaping birds in certain places under certain circumstances, but the visitors to this site are so infrequent that the bird is not getting overtaped and getting coming out. But now that you've seen my fabulous photos of Zapata wren, you can see a decent one. This is a photo by David Beebe. To me, it gives me the feel of, in terms of structure, of almost a cactus wren, and not a, let's say, long-billed marsh wren, you know, a marsh wren. But there you go. It's a wonderful bird. It's one of our prime target birds, and it's a delight to see. There are some other locations where the Zapata wren is found and where people go, but indeed, I have found at least one other location where we go to be overtaped and where too many buses drive up. This location, you have to take a boat in, you have to work for it. Other locations to find Zapata wren, I like to avoid, and I think Sole likes to avoid also. But after a full day of going after the Zapata wren, oh yes, here is Michael. We'll also leave some goodies for the guys who took us out on those boats. Here's a photo that Michael is distributing some hats. I think the blue ones were, for those of you who are interested in baseball, that was the Chicago Cubs hat the year they won the World Series, or the year after they won the World Series. But they're baseball hats. The Cubans love baseball, as you probably know. There are baseball hats, there are bird hats, there are location hats of our refuges or parks that we share with them to just have a connection with them. Then we go back, finally, after a day of out in the field of hot, being out in the Zapata swamp. We'll come back and we'll go to our backyard. This is almost literally the backyard of some of our casas particulares where we stay. As opposed to our visit to Viñales, where we're in one hotel, in Zapata, in Playa Larga, we'll separate the people, 2 or 3 in this place, 2 or 3 in that place, 2 or 3 in another place. That is to say, these Airbnbs. And the beach will be right behind us. It's a wonderful place to bathe. But we also have the opportunity to go on another day to and take a walk through some of the forest that is there in the area, to go to one of the cenotes, one of the limestone sinks, and take a swim there. And here we are swimming at one of the limestone sinks, one of the cenotes in the region. Well, so much for Zapata Swamp. We invariably, everybody, whether they go to Viñales, Zapata, they will also, of course, go in and out of Havana because that's the way to get into the country. And it's really worthwhile, not only culturally and linguistically and historically, but bird-wise and naturally. There's some interesting things to say. You can't but be interested in the architecture or the history or the cars, for that matter, in Havana. You'll see some stages of repair and recovery here, or the 1950s Chevys and Pontiacs seen here in one of the squares by the former presidential palace, now the Museum of the Revolution. And by the way, this is a good location because one of the places we usually stay is just, I believe, to the right and up here, an apartment or a set of apartments where we stay. But first, I must take you back to one of my visits with my wife, and Sole helped us make arrangements here in Havana. This is a picture we took of the place. This is a picture of one of the typical streets, and there's the Capitol. Looks like the US Capitol, but it's a little on the slimmer side. And this is a picture from our Airbnb, our Casa Particular, our Casa de Renta, looking down the street. We were there a couple of days. It's a typical street, our digs in 2017. Another place to visit in Havana before I go back to the Museum of the Revolution, the old historic palace, is the Hotel Nacional. And this is the red-legged thrush that's feeding at our feet. A very, 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 very rare bird in Florida. I think there may be 3 records now, but it's common and it's at our feet while we sip drinks with our binoculars. Here's my friend Larry here. Here's our driver Ronell. Here's the hotel in the background. We're in the back. The back of the hotel is a glorious location for birds and nature, for good viewing and good music. And here's the entrance to the hotel itself. A hotel steeped in history. There's a wonderful book, and I recommend it to you all, called Havana Nocturne by T.J. English, who talks about the history of the hotel, the history of Havana, this hotel in particular, with stories of gamblers, singers, the mafia, stories that go on, and it's quite interesting. But also in Havana, we'll go visit the University of Havana. Here's our friends Alieni and Lourdes. We stopped by their offices at the Havana University, and you can see they're both smiling because we're handing them a pile of coloring books, bird coloring books that Soledad can tell you about at the end of this talk, bird coloring books that we're giving them to help educate some of the youngsters that come under their educational efforts. Oh, and by the way, that behind there's Ronell, our driver. Here's some of the buildings in different, typical, wonderful, exciting stages of repair, the typical washes being dried on the balconies. Here's a hotel which has an old frontage, but a brand new internal guts, so to speak. I don't know which joint venture this was, but it's in Havana, and in particular, this is a good picture of some more photos of buildings in different states of repair and renewal. Our digs are here, like I said, near the Museum of the Revolution. We're here on the 3rd or 4th floor. Here's Solean with her bag as we enter one of the apartments that we have. And it's very interesting. Here's a view from the balcony down to the museum, down to the place. Now I'm showing you the architecture and the location just so you get a feeling, and the cars for that matter, for the town itself. But we always carry your binoculars. Never leave your binoculars, because you'll always on the seashore, on the edge of the seashore, on the edge of the walk, the Malecon, as you'll see, we'll get to see brown pelicans or royal terns, and also Caspian terns, also peregrine falcons on the buildings sometimes in wintertime, and they're wintering there. Or here, the Antillean palm swift, or the Cuban martin, even nesting in a couple of the churches at squares where we come and visit. So never leave your binoculars at home. And if you're asking, yes, indeed, there are Eurasian collared doves there also, if you were wondering. 40 years ago, there weren't. Maybe 35 years ago, there weren't. But now you hear them outside your town, your patio, or your little balcony at your where you're staying overnight, at your casas particulares. So here's the wonderful Malecon where we walk and we view the Castillo on the other side. This is the entrance to the harbor where we'll see some birds. But we also take the bus to one of the better locations in Havana for birds, the Jardín Botánico Nacional, the National Botanical Garden. It's about 800 hectares with 4,000 plants. It's about 25 kilometers outside the city, and it's undervisited, tremendously undervisited. Sometimes there are 2 or 3 buses there. And we love it. This is part of the Japanese section of the garden. And it's great for birds, including, by the way, this may very well look like a eastern meadowlark, but our friend Niels Navarro says, of course, this is the Cuban subspecies, non-migratory subspecies, and it should be a full species. And next week, they're going to call it the Cuban meadowlark. So we go to see it, to make sure we see it and put it in escrow, so to speak. So we have another endemic species on our list. I'm saying that only half in jest, but it's an interesting subspecies / species. Don't tell Niels that I am ambivalent on this question, but it's just typical of what we do. Also, there at the park are some wonderful looks at their American kestrel, the Cuban forms, both the dark or rufous form here on the left and the light form on the right. Here is a typical picture of my first trip to the botanical gardens in 2006, I think it was, when I took a taxi cab from downtown and went there and walked through the gardens all day. My legs were aching. And here's, by the way, a view of a vehicle in repair, let's call it. That was a Soviet-style motorcycle with a sidecar that the worker was repairing. By the way, the Cubans are fabulous mechanics, not because they want to be, but because they have to be. They've become highly skilled in repairing and maintaining all kinds of vehicles. And on the right is one of the ponds in the Japanese section of the botanical gardens, a favorite stop that we make, where we can see, the common gallinule and sometimes some shorebirds, and invariably we'll bump into a smooth-billed honey somewhere along the route, and a giant lizard cuckoo. So now we have finished our 3 locations, 3 Havana, Viñales, Viñales, Zapata Swamp, and Havana in this order. Viñales area, Zapata Swamp, and now Havana. And we'll take some very quick visits to 4 side locations. Guanahacabibes here, the North Coast here, Baracoa, which is Sole's favorite place here on the other end of the island. So we're going from one end to the other. And Topes de Collantes in this area here. So we'll take quick trips. First, the Guanahacabibes. It's a good place for migrants, fall migrants in particular. Fall migrants will come through your area in Jacksonville, the rest of Florida, down into the Keys, launch themselves across, hit Cuba, then hit Cuba maybe around here, and then proceed westward to Guanahacabibes and launch themselves one more time across toward the Yucatan. A number of species will do that, particularly raptors, which are not terribly excited about going across water. And Guanahacabibes is a particular good place, a central location for migrating swallowtail kites. Those gorgeous swallowtail kites will go there. And here's some of the beaches. Guanahacabibes, has some lovely white sandy beaches. And here's one of the places where we have stayed, Maria La Gorda, Maria the Chubby. Welcome to this place. It's a popular place, not necessarily for birders, believe it or not, but for snorkelers and scuba divers. It's great stuff off of Guanahacabibes also. And we go and visit. These are Cuban banders. This is our friend Ernesto with Cuban banders, banding birds. I'm not sure, that kind of looked like a female blue grosbeak, one of our birds that he's banding right there, but there you go. And here is the visitor center of the National Park Guanahacabibes, where we enter and we visit with our friend Osmani. Osmani is the assistant director of the park. He's a great birder. And we're handing him, you can see, a box of goodies for him to share and use. Lots of feeders there. And here we are outside of, by the way, also, moments like this are really terrific. We both hand them stuff and go birding simultaneously. And Osmani helped us find some birds. That's an interesting visit to Guanahacabibes. We'll continue on to the north coast of the island here, Cayo Guillermo and other places, Cayo Coco, which is also around this area. It's important for migrants also. It's an area where birders don't necessarily go frequently, but I like to visit there occasionally. There are a number of beautiful resorts on the North Beach where you have the opportunity to swim and frolic and have a good time. And these are joint ventures between Cuban and sometimes Spanish or Italian or British companies. There are 4 of these, 4 or 5, I can't remember. I think there are 4 of these locations, of these resorts, which are all inclusive. The visitors from France, Italy, Great Britain, Israel, Canada will come there. And for them, it might as well be Aruba, Barbados, Nassau, or parts of resorts in the Dominican Republic. It's not Cuba per se. It's self-contained, hermetically sealed, but there are some neat birds there. Namely, West Indian whistling duck is, I found, more accessible there than most places on the island. That's the bird on the upper left. I've seen lots of Cuban gnatcatchers there. And probably it's one of the last locations on the island where Bahama mockingbird comes as far south as to touch onto the Cuban coast. There's also plenty of, once again, great lizard cuckoo, which we see on regular occasions. But this next photo will tell you a couple of things, photos of mine. It's a photo of Ray or Rodell, one of our drivers, on a trip I took not with Sole, but with other colleagues. He had a pair of small binoculars, those cheapos, 5 power, 8 power, and they were falling apart. They were okay, but they weren't the greatest. So we gave him a new pair of binoculars. And we gave his binoculars to the driver. The driver was very appreciative, and he was doing a good thing with it. But here's a road. This is where 2 years before was just mangroves, but now it's a newly built road for development, for tourist development in the area. And it's a picture of what the future may look like for that part of Cuba. The country is more and more dependent on hard dollars, tourist dollars, and we may touch on that perhaps in the near future. And by the way, there's Ray enjoying the new pair of binoculars we gave him. I think he's looking at some Orioles, some Cuban Orioles that were at one of the stops that we made. Next stop, the other end of the island. Remember, Guanahacabibes were here. We're going to Baracoa. It's a lovely town, and as the sign says, beautiful, clean, and friendly, or healthy, excuse me. This is the harbor. It's a wonderful town. It is entree to one of the best locations on the island for bird watching, the national park, Humboldt National Park, a national, one of their national historical sites, as they call it. I would probably translate. It's a giant park. It's about 275 square miles. It's the last known location for ivory-billed woodpecker on the island. And thus it gives you an idea of its remoteness and its virgin magnificence in terms of the life. It's a tough walking through it, and you'll get to see. Here's some of the goodies. As I show you in green, here's a friend of ours, Giovanni, who's the park director. We gave him some feeders. Here I'm holding up a hummingbird calendar. Next to me is El Indio, as his nickname is. He's a park ranger. He's holding up some feeders, and next to him is Noelvis. She's the specialist in the park on Polimitas, the snails, the unique snails of the eastern part of the island. And here we are walking through a part of the island. We got to a point where, well, we had to cross this shallow river, but as we prearranged, a cart was there waiting for us. I guess it was a horse cart. And some of us went on the cart, and some of us waded across the shallow river up to our knees to get to the other side and do birding. But there's some excellent birds there, including, and this is a bird I've mentioned a few times, the Cuban emerald and the Cuban parakeet. And here are a couple of crummy photos of mine of the palamitas, the snails, unique snails of the area. But remember, before we visited, we saw the loggerhead kingbird, which I told you was a larger version, slightly larger version than your gray kingbird. Well, here's the mega version. This is the giant kingbird. This is the gray kingbird on steroids, on super steroids, and it's a wonderful endemic of the island, and we almost invariably see one or two of these here or at the orchid gardens or elsewhere. In any case, this is Baracoa for you. This is the hotel we stayed at on our left. This is one of the librarians we visited. We gave her lots of goodies. This is a a building which is under disrepair from our picture at the hotel, which shows you a couple of things. I thought it was damaged by hurricanes, and hurricanes sweep through Baracoa regularly, but apparently it was a fire, as Soleil spoiled the story for me. It's a fire that ruined that particular location, but it could be the hurricane, but nonetheless, repairing after things such as fires or hurricanes and separate parts of the island can be extremely tedious, expensive, and difficult. Moving right along, this is an aside on the bird trade. This is one of my photos of the streets of Baracoa. Two guys bringing handmade on the left or commercialized on the right bird cages. And in the bird cages are not parakeets or finches that you might buy from one of our bird stores, but birds of Cuba, birds of the United States, migrating birds, what have you. This aside, here we have to deal with this problem. This is our friend Carlos Peña here, Ernesto, and Carlos's sister, I believe, Lourdes. She's director of the Holguin Historical Museum, and here she is showing a poster that our colleagues helped create about protecting the native birds of the island and the migrants, and that they are better off free and wild rather than being in cages. There's just quickly in the town of Holguin, a Cuban bullfinch in a cage. By the way, it's almost a status symbol to have caged birds, unfortunately, as it shows your upward mobility and some degree of enough wealth that you're able to have a bird. Let's put it that way. There are some pictures on the left from Cuban bullfinch and Playa Larga. On the right, Santiago, a yellow-faced grassquit in a cage. Once again, Santa Clara, it looks like Cuban bullfinch. On the right, another Cuban bullfinch in Santa Clara. On the left, Havana, a Cuban grassquit. On the right, lo and behold, in Havana, a indigo bunting, male indigo bunting. It's a problem that our friends are trying to counteract. It is illegal in Cuba, but like jaywalking, it's sometimes enforced and sometimes not enforced, depending on the province you're in. Our dear friends, Michael and others, at least when we last had some conversations with them on the subject, are putting up some pressure, at least in the Havana area, to crack down and on the wild bird trade. Enough said. Topes de Collantes is a quick visit to a National Reserve Park, lovely place in the Escambray Mountains. It was the location I've only visited once. I know that Soleil has probably been there multiple times. The region was the location for the 2017 Birds Caribbean Conference. I'm wearing their t-shirt right now. There you go. It was a wonderful international conference, one of the most successful ones. By the way, that's my wife, Yvonne. This mega truck took us from one location at the conference to the other because they were about the equivalent of 3 or 4 kilometers from each other, and it was quite hilly to get from one place to another. This on the right is the 1950s hotel. That was the hotel, what's it called? Coeur Hotel, massive Coeur Hotel, built in the mid-50s, has 210 rooms. It was used at the time and even after the revolution for tuberculosis patients in a clean and reviving location in the mountains. Speaking of the mountains, this is some wonderful pictures that are typical of the location. And here we are birding up and down some of the roads and hills of the Escambray near Topes de Collantes. Some of the birds we see, terrific. Cuban toady, I told you I'd show you this little job. He's a one. Toadies are terrific, and this is now an endemic species of the island. They really click very nicely. We can hear them and see them in their little bowers. And our guides invariably know the best places to find them. Also, Cuban grassquit is typical of the area. But one of the things we brought to this particular conference in 2017, and Sole can add details, there were a couple of hundred of us from different countries, from different islands in the Caribbean for this regional conference, a large contingent of dozens and dozens of Cubans there. And this is just the stuff that Yvonne and I brought, stuffed in our different suitcases. Let's see, I think there were 3 binoculars, a camera, a bunch of feeders, as you can see. And the Kaufman Guide, Ken Kaufman's Guide to Birds, which is translated into Spanish. You may or may not know that. It's very helpful. It's more helpful if you're Mexican in Mexico, but it's still very useful in the Caribbean. And more on that later. And we gave those away. For the lessons for today, well, it's not always easy to yank out the lessons, but there are lessons for Cuban birding and Cuban engagement, I think. Who will take you there? Well, there are a number of folks and people who in the previous past have taken us there. There's Soleil's Friendship Association, and I've gone most of the times with Soleil there. There's our friend Gary Markowski from the Caribbean Conservation Trust. There's also Birds Caribbean, as I mentioned before, and our friends from Optics for the Tropics. More on that later. Our drivers are terrific. They are in these mini buses that hold about, Sully will be able to tell me better, probably about 30 people, 25, 30 people. We don't put stuff more than 15 in there. Our driver here, Sobe, is an essential ingredient to make this event meaningful. Soledad either looks for Sobe or another driver, as I've shown you before. You will notice he has a little pin on. Oh, this we also distribute to all of our people. It's a little pin of both the United States and Cuban flags crossed. And we give each of our participants, when we go, 2 or 3 of these, one to keep for themselves and a couple to give away. I recommend to you a wonderful show. It's a little old. It was done in 2011, a decade ago, but things don't change that quickly in Cuba. It was from the PBS type show, Nature. It's called Cuba, the Accidental Eden. It talks about the natural history and the possibilities and the traditions on the island, and sometimes the capacity to interact, Cuban ecotourism and maintaining a ecosystem that will survive. I recommend a couple of books, Endemic Birds of Cuba, done by our friend Niels Navarro. Here he is signing one of the books from one of our participants. This is at Palpite in Bernabé's backyard. It's a fine book because it was printed and developed and published by Sole and her operation in both Inglés y en Español también. I put it in green. It's in Spanish also. And the exorbitant price, no, it's not an exorbitant. The extra price we pay for this one allows Sole to print extra copies in Spanish and to give away. And that's very important. And I'm pleased and excited to pay for these. Very reasonable. I'm looking for the price. She will tell us when I hand it over to her. But they're terrific. Other books. Oh, but here's the inside. Niels has done symbols, range maps, summarized looks, his own art, details on nesting, the whole bit, and spaces for you to write your own notes for the endemic birds, for birds that are in countries, mostly in Cuba, but overlap with other countries in the nearby Caribbean, etc. It's a really excellent book. There's the historic and very good book, Birds of Cuba, done by the great Orlando Garrido, who's one of the prime ornithologists of the island, together with Arturo Kirkconnell. And it also is in Spanish, but the Spanish version is provided by our friends at the Cornell University and Cornell University Press. The book is out of date, and what our friend Niels Navarro is doing a mega version of the Birds of Cuba, and he's driving Sole crazy with the deadline and the editorial aspects of it as we speak. And as I mentioned before, Ken's book is wonderful, Ken Kaufman's book, both in English and in Spanish. Ken himself spent $20,000 of his own money from his own pocket to publish the Spanish version. And he had some fine friends translate that, and it's really exciting to hand that out. And it was done officially by Houghton Mifflin Press. Inside that book, by the way, I mean, you can, I think you can get to learn some of the English and Spanish topography, so to speak, of the birds of the parts of the birds. Learn to say punta de ala for wingtip, for instance, or corona for crown, you know, or garganta for throat. And sometimes when our guides, Michael and Ernesto, who speak impeccable English, by the way, get excited about about showing us a bird, they may lose 2 or 3 of their words in English, and it's sometimes helpful to be able to cross-translate with them. But just to learn stuff, it's great to do this. And speaking of great, this is the fine book that Sole's operation, Ediciones Nuevos Mundos, has done, coloring my word, the cotorra, the Cuban parrot, and its illustrations and a coloring book, which we handed out multiple times. And she also does the annotated checklist Birds of Cuba by Niels Navarro. I bring you this picture because it's a picture of Sole and our friend Ernesto and our friend Joni from Optics for the Tropics. There's a little story. We were leaving, we were going, we were having as our last trip, we meaning Sole and myself, I think it was Michael, heading west to Havana, wrapping up our trip, our last days on the island. And Sole had extra coloring books that she had in here in her plastic bag. And we called and spoke to Ernesto and Johnny coming, who had just arrived in Cuba and were going in the other direction. We decided to meet on the Autopista Numero Uno, the highway number 1, and exchange goodies with our friends. We gave them the coloring books that they were able, our extra coloring books that they were able to give out. It shows you what this kind of stuff can do. Now I hand it over to Sole for her details on some of the other educational and conservation connections we have had. I can change the image as she tells me.
Well, Paul, thank you. That was terrific. I never get tired of hearing these stories. What Paul touched on was the illegal caged bird trade, which is rampant in Cuba. And one of our big projects, one of our main projects, is educating children, helping educate children to appreciate nature in general, birds in particular. And so what they do is they do field trips with the children, and we supply them with materials. As you can see here, we have the coloring book. You also see the T-shirt that Joni makes, Joni from Optics for the Tropics. She makes all kinds of wonderful T-shirts. And this one says, the freer the better, I guess, is protect them. And we have given the kids kind of little playing cards that have birds on them and teaches them to name the birds, and to recognize the birds and appreciate them in general. Okay, on. And we also have, well, Paul, you can talk about the spotting scope here.
Sure, and this was a spotting scope given to me. It's I think it's an old Bal scope. Some of you old timers may remember them. You can drive a truck over the scope and it'll last forever. This is from the 60s, and a friend of mine from the Anne Arundel Bird Club around Annapolis gave me the scope to give to somebody who needed it. And I held it for about 3 years until I brought it to Cuba and on one of our trips. And gave it to some of our friends. And lo and behold, I found a photo later on with that very scope with kids around it. That in the, I believe it's in the Baracoa or Holguin area. And here's another pair of binoculars that we gave and were helped to give girls. Oh, and by the way, I just better flying. Is that what this says?
Yeah.
Yeah. There you go. So
That's another T-shirt. We must have
Another
10
t-shirt
T-shirts
and stickers.
that we've brought over time. Every time we go to Cuba, we bring binoculars, materials, coloring books, crayons, colored pencils, everything. And different organizations also give us things like Optics for the Tropics. This gives us binoculars primarily, and also T-shirts, but other organizations also send materials down. We also have a project of making murals, again, in support of educating people against the illegal caged bird trade. This is a mural that they were making in outside of Santiago de Cuba. And these are children they're on a field trip. Of course, we're in time of COVID now. So they're all wearing masks. But we bring paints, paint brushes and things like that. I can't read it. It's so small. I
think it says
my portable, so I can.
Right now, ellos son, these are better, I think, mejor, in nature, not in your house.
Yeah, okay, but yeah, exactly. And
this,
we have several, God, that's right. The Cape Cod Birding Club had given them a grant. I think it was like $1,500, with which we bought materials and brought them to Cuba. So we brought paints and things. So in thanking them, they put their insignia, their logo up there, but they made a little mistake on the cod, and they got a Cape Cod Bird Club. But we liked it so much, we thought they should leave it that way.
Don't tell them.
Yeah.
It's perfect just the way it is.
It's great anyway. And here's another one. Just getting going on the painting. I think we have at least 4 murals, and then we kind of stopped because of COVID, because we weren't able to bring any more materials down. So, but as soon as we can, we will start up the project again, and it will go. We'll have some in Havana. We'll have some in Camagüey. We already have 2 in Baracoa, and wherever they want them, we will try to put murals up in places where they will be visible and where people will see them and understand the message, hopefully.
And I'll just add 2 things. By the way, this is Inez, is it not, on the left?
Oh, there's
Inez.
Inez. My computer's so small, I can't see
everything.
Okay. Yeah, there's Inez, and she is the one who's in charge of Santiago de Cuba projects, and she's wonderful. We've been working with her for about 10 years, and she does field trips every weekend with 30, 40 kids, 10 teachers, and they go out to the countryside or to the swamps or wherever, and they teach the kids, they do games, they do all kinds of things. She's been wonderful, really wonderful.
Terrific. Well, this kind of wraps us up. This is about birds and people and conservation connection, and there's the Friendship Association's website. Is a picture of one of the trips I took, and
oh God,
this is New Year's Day. I believe this was New Year's Day a few years ago, 2018. Okay. I can't remember the year. There's Joni in the background. There's my wife Yvonne. There's Ernesto, and a number of Americans and Cubans here. This is at the Tiki restaurant on, I think, New Year's Day a few years ago, as I said. And here's that picture of Sole with that with that parrot that was injured, so to speak, and is now appropriately captive. Let's put it that way. Yes.
Actually, I wanted to say one more thing.
Go ahead.
For those of you who might be interested in a photography, a nature photography competition at Topes, which was the last place Paul showed you, the one with the beautiful waterfalls and the really microclimate, exquisitely beautiful place. They are going to have in person for the first time in 2 years their annual contest called Naturaleza Digital, digital nature. And it's a wonderful thing. Even if you're not interested in the competition, it's a wonderful thing to participate in, and it's not expensive. The difficulty is getting there right now because there are not a lot of flights, but that might change in the next couple of weeks. So if anybody's interested, send me an email, and I will send you the brochure, and you can go from there. And then, of course, we are hoping to do tours starting in January, February. Things are supposed to open up on the 15th of November, and I'm supposed to go on the 15th of November. So by the end of the month, by the end of November, we should know if and when we're going to be able to do some birding tours. And we will go to primarily the first three spots that Paul covered. But they're great trips, and January, February is a great time to go. The weather's perfect. And the Cubans really need it desperately. They need the people coming to Cuba. I mean, it's been a bad 2 years. So again, if you're interested, get in touch with us. Either
Yes,
one of
and
Paul,
I
whatever.
know we've gone on and on, probably longer than you had expected, but Carol, if you have any questions,
Right, I have one
Sure.
question in the chat from Christine. And if anybody else has any additional questions, and if you guys don't mind hanging out, anybody else has any additional questions, just drop them in the chat and we'll cover them as we're able to. But Christine wants to know, and you kind of answered this, but I'm curious as well, how are you able to travel to Cuba as an American citizen? Because that's always kind of problematic.
Sorry, over to you.
That's easy. That's easy. We can go to Cuba legally. It is legal to go to Cuba under certain conditions. The difficulty right now is COVID. It isn't going to Cuba. You go with a group and you have to sign an affidavit, and that's fine. It's fine. It's not a problem. The only problem is travel right now to Cuba. They have said they're going to open up on November 15th. They expect 90% of the population to be vaccinated by November 15th. They will require that everyone is fully vaccinated, and you'll have to show them that card. So that's number one. Number two is, are they going to start putting flights back on November 15th? And our plans right now are to go in January and February, to take one trip in January, maybe 2 in February, because there will be a huge demand because it's been so long since we've been able to go. So we should know certainly by mid-November or the end of November what the flight situation is going to be. And I think it'll be fine. I think it will be fine. And I think, again, we have an itinerary and a schedule and everything set up. So if you're the least bit interested, just let us know and we'll send it to you. But in terms of going, if you go with a group and you have a purpose, it's legal. And it has to be within a certain guideline by the State Department, which I won't go into, but it is legal. Our trips are legal. So
Great.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
You
so
cannot go as a tourist.
Right.
You cannot go as a tourist, okay? But we do not go as tourists.
And what's the category that we go under? Sole?
It's support for the Cuban people. Okay, and we stay in private homes and we eat in private restaurants, and as you saw, we give things out to help the ornithologists, and things like that. So we're perfectly legal in that respect.
Yeah, there's plenty of evidence that we're engaging with the public
Oh,
in
yeah.
terms of meeting with the people, and that kind of engagement is part
And
of
you
the
don't
theme
need-
of what I showed you.
Yeah, you don't need to speak Spanish. We translate everything. It's just, and it's not high end in the sense of staying in fancy hotels. It's staying in simple digs, but the digs are air conditioned and clean, and the food is good and clean. So it's a healthy trip, and it's not terribly strenuous. There are a few points that might be a little strenuous, but not really. And the only thing is you have to get up early.
Well, so
birders don't mind that.
right, we're all used to that.
There you
So regarding the trips, Muriel is asking, how long is the trip? How long does it last?
It's a bit
Typically.
depending on the flights, because some flights go only every 2 or 3 days, so it can be 10, 11, or 12 days. That just depends on when you get the flight and when you come back. It's really a question of the airlines, but it would be between 10 is short and 12 is just right. 12 is about right.
Any other questions from anyone else before we say goodnight? I don't see any additional questions.
Okay.
No.
Great.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Paul and Soleil. We certainly appreciate this fascinating and beautiful presentation about the birds of Cuba and your engagement with the people of Cuba. It was very interesting. I had no idea you were doing all that. So that's really good to learn about it. And we truly appreciate you being with us tonight and spending time with us tonight. It was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. It was
Sure.
It was a delight.
All right. Well, thank you and have a good evening, everyone.
Good
Good night.
night. Good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.